recognize that piece of music? Of course you do. You know that as Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's also Baba Black Sheep and the Alphabet Song and a piece called vous, dirai-je, Maman in French, another folk song. This was a theme that the famous composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart wrote. He wrote a whole piece based on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. In this episode of Learn and Love Music, we're going to look at 3 different composers, including Mozart and Schumann and Debussy, and how they were able to write pieces that were very accessible for young people, but sophisticated for adult listeners as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Learn and Love Music. But before we begin, if you value this content, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. So, let's get started. So, of course you recognize Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but Twinkle Twinkle Little Star was not written until the late 1800s. This piece was actually based on a French folk song called vous, dirai-je, Maman, which means, oh, shall I tell you, Mommy, what is tormenting me? Daddy wants me to reason like a grown-up person. Me, I say that sweets are more important. So it's sort of a funny little piece, but Mozart uses this as a set of variations, as we mentioned before. And each variation has a different character. We listened to one before that had a right-hand line, and then he has the variation number 2 has the left hand busy. Each variation has its own little character. Later on we have triplets, which would be and they're all in that wonderful innocent key of C major. So let's talk a little bit about variations. Most variation pieces by classical composers start out with a theme, and of course we know this theme very well. And what they do is they add variations to that. And you'll notice that in the first variation that Mozart wrote, you don't hear the melody anywhere. All you hear are running 16th notes. So let me play that. Now you may ask, what does that have to do with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star? But what Mozart has done is he's imagining the theme in the background, almost as if he's singing it to you, but you're not really hearing it. I'm going to sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star while I play the variation. At least I'll try to. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So you see, it's very clever the way he winds the melody around, even when the melody's not there. One other element to this piece is that Mozart wrote this piece without any phrasing. There's no marks in the score where to phrase the notes, where to group the notes. When I first learned this piece, I was actually had played quite a bit. It was toward the end of my college years, and my teacher, Janine Dowis, who is a wonderful, wonderful teacher, she wanted to go through this piece with me because it was a great teaching piece, and also she had some ideas about phrasing that I think are very interesting. And her ideas were interesting because Mozart didn't write the phrasing in. So what she did is, on my score, she circled certain notes that she wanted to bring out, and so you sort of create a little melody above the Twinkle Twinkle Star variations. So I'm going to show you where those notes are. So we have so if I played them, that's more interesting than just Mozart also was a little clever because he wanted to have some of the variations not exactly sound like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, because he wanted them in a different key. So he writes in Variation 8, minore, or in the minor key. This is a sadder version of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and he writes sort of a canon in the left hand. So listen to the minor key and also the canon in the left hand. So it sounds a little bit like Bach because it's contrapuntal at different voices, and it's in a minor key. It's very clever of Mozart. Variation 10 has an interesting piano technique, crosshand technique. It reminds me of that scene in Music Man when the little girl Amarilla asks her piano teacher if she can play her crosshand piece. Crosshand technique is used a lot in piano repertoire, and Mozart used it as well. Next, we're going to look at Robert Schumann's Scenes from Childhood. It's a set of short pieces. It's a beautiful set of pieces, but when I was younger, I always thought this was sort of like a little kiddies piece. When I was a freshman in college, I got a chance to listen to the great pianist Vladimir Horowitz play. It was at Severance Hall in Cleveland, Ohio, and I got one of the last tickets. I remember I was so excited to hear him play. He hadn't played in about 6 years at that point. So there was a huge ovation when he came out, and he played Scenes from Childhood. And he made this seemingly small, beautiful lyrical piece into a masterpiece. So I'll always remember that. It's a piece that I love, and I love teaching it as well as performing it, but I want to share some of it with you today. So in the first piece in Scenes from Childhood, it's called From Foreign Lands and People. It's a beautiful theme that's somewhat repetitive, but it has this wonderful leap. It repeats 3 times, and then it changes. It's very beautiful. And what Schumann does is he accompanies it with these wonderful harmonies. And the second beat, it's a diminished chord. Right away in the piece, to put this very unusual chord in, he's trying to make it sound sort of foreign, a little different than what you would expect. So listen to this first couple lines of From Foreign Lands and Peoples, from Scenes from Childhood. It's very simple and straightforward. The third little piece in Scenes from Childhood is called Catch Me. And it's interesting to note that back in medieval times, there was something called a catch. And a catch was a type of piece that had like a fugue line in it, sort of as if the two voices are trying to catch each other. So what Schumann does is he takes this idea and he has a lower line, almost as if the lower line is trying to catch up to the upper line. So it's kind of like a fugue in a way, but it keeps these light, short notes chasing each other through the piece. So here's Catch Me. seventh piece in Scenes from Childhood is the most famous. It's called Traumerei, and it has to do with dreaming. And the beauty of this piece are these wonderful leaps in the melody, and the harmonies are rich, and it's very familiar to many people. So listen to Dreaming from Scenes from Childhood. One more piece from Scenes from Childhood. This is number 11, and it's called Frightening. In this one, Schumann has a minor theme. And then a section that follows very quickly after that is the faster tempo, Mark Schneller, and he puts it in the left hand. And you'll notice the contrast between the lyrical piece, almost as if a child is falling asleep and suddenly they're wakened by a nightmare or something like that. So, but it's the huge difference in the character. Listen to the beginning of Frightening. Next, we're going to look at a piece from Debussy's Children's Corner. Some of you may remember that I did the piece called "The Snow is Dancing" in an earlier episode of Learn and Love Music. But today we're going to look at a piece called Golliwog's Cakewalk. Debussy has chosen a ragtime, which is sort of interesting because rags were very popular in the middle of the 19th century. One, we know Scott Joplin, the American composer, wrote a lot of rags, including the Maple Leaf Rag and some other ones that are well known in the United States. But I think Debussy probably was aware of this because this was written in the early 1900s, probably about 1903 or something like that. And he uses that idea of rag, so it has a syncopated feel to it. So he's kind of copying American music in a way. And it's really quite a fun piece. I use this as a children's teaching piece, but the whole set of Children's Corner, all of the pieces are just wonderful. So let's listen to a little bit of this ragtime music by Claude Debussy, Golliwog's Cakewalk. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learn and Love Music, looking at pieces for children and about children. If you have children, introduce them to these pieces. I think it's a great way to get them to know a little bit more about classical music. And I'll also list on our site here some other really common pieces, fun pieces for children, pieces children can listen to. So I hope to see you next time on Learn and Love Music. And thanks for watching.